Hey home bakers, how are you? We've kneaded a normal bread dough on this channel before, and today we're going to do an enriched dough in real time. Things are about to get awkward. Roll that theme tune! Hello to you and welcome back to the Bake with Jack YouTube channel, where I make videos to help you make bread. If that's your cup of tea, you get some value out of this video, click subscribe to stick around. Always in bread making videos, somebody starts kneading dough and then it fades out and fades back into the fully kneaded dough, and nobody does it in real time apart from me. Why? Last time we did a regular dough in 8 minutes, but an enriched dough with milk and butter and sugar and eggs involved, I like to give it 10 minutes. Just an extra couple of minutes to work up that gluten and make it nice and strong to make a super light bun. Today we're going to do it in real time and see if I can fill 10 minutes of silence with just general waffle. Spoiler alert, it's more trickier than I thought. Cut to the table. Here we are at the table and I've got my dry ingredients in here already. Flour, salt and sugar. Got another bowl here with my egg and milk in, and I'm going to add my yeast to that and give it a little whisk. You don't have to whisk it, it's just quite a nice thing to do. You can just chuck everything in together if you want. Now I'm going to add my dry stuff to my wet bowl. We always do it that way around because then you haven't got to clean this bowl. You just wipe it out like that, put it back in the cupboard. Nobody will ever know. Now my dough scraper, I'm going to mix it up like this. That's everything in the recipe apart from the butter, which we're going to put in later. And I won't tell you why at the moment. I'll tell you why in a moment. When your doughs come together like this, it's time to add your butter. It's nice and soft, so you can easily dot it around your dough like this and just dimple it in with your fingertips like that. Use your scraper to cut it in to the dough. Like this, give it a little mix. It's never all going to go into the dough like this. It's going to be buttery and sticky and slippery, and that's okay. I'm going to get it out onto the table. Clean your bowl out as normal with the edge of your scraper nicely, because we're going to reuse the bowl after. Now I'm going to start kneading. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes. I always do enriched doughs for 10 minutes, regular doughs for 8 minutes. With the heel of my hand, I'm pushing it up the table like this. You can see it's buttery, it's sticky, it's messy, and this is part of the game. You know the rules about flour. Do not add flour at this point. It comes straight out on the table, and we can use our dough scraper to have a little tidy up along the way. If you don't know about that, you must know about that by now from being on this channel. And if you don't know about that, that is the #1 mistake people make, is to dust their dough at this point. We don't do it, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Scrape up your dough every once in a while like this. You might think to yourself, this butter's not going to go in. It does look kind of slippery on the outside, but in time it will go in. All of a sudden it will just start taking up that butter. There's some here on my scraper that I'm still aware of. We're going to use that too, and we're going to get it in. Just continue kneading like this with your heel of the hand. It's going to stick on your table a little bit, but only lasts for a little bit. You can use 2 hands like this if you want to. One after another. You can use both hands together if you want. And what I'm avoiding doing here is stretching the dough way up the table. I'm kind of pushing it along the table, but I'm not stretching it out beyond its means like that. That's what we want to avoid. We don't want to tear the dough or anything like that. Right, I'm going to get myself another scraper so I can scrape off my scraper, get all that butter into the dough where it belongs. Like this. I'm very conscious when I'm kneading dough. It looks like I'm putting a lot of effort into it and I'm being quite heavy-handed with it, but I'm really not. I'm being gentle. I'm just pushing and folding the dough without stretching it beyond its means and tearing it up. So let's talk about why we do this in the first place. If you've been here for a while, you know why we do this in the first place. We're working up that gluten inside. Gluten is what gives the dough its strength. It's the elastic. elasticity inside of the dough. And we have to give it a little bit of physical work like this in order to work it up and make the dough really, really strong. So when the yeast goes to town making all those bubbles inside, the dough can hold it all and puff it up. And that's why it's important that we work in the first place. Regular dough for 8 minutes. Enriched dough I like to give to 10 minutes, just to give an extra couple of minutes to make it stronger, because the stronger the dough, the lighter the buns in the end. Now you can see the butter's all been taken up now. Look, my table is pretty much clean and the butter has gone into the dough. And all along the way, I didn't use any additional flour, and I never do right until the very end. And even though you probably know already, I'm going to go over it just to refresh our memories as to why I don't do it. And the reason is quite a simple one, really. Effectively, what you're doing here is you're waiting for a change to happen in the dough. You're waiting for your dough to become responsive, to become nice, round and smooth. And a lot of the time, what people do is they add flour to the dough to stop it from sticking to the hands and stop it from sticking to the table. And it will work, it will stop it from sticking for a little bit, and then the dough will take up that flour. Once it's taken up that flour, it will be sticky again, start sticking all over the place to you and everything else, and it'll get well stressful. And then you'll toss a whole load of extra flour on top to stop it from sticking again. And this cycle often, certainly for beginner bread makers, the cycle continues. You keep adding flour to your dough, and you'll do it with the best intentions, because it often says in the recipe, knead it on a floured surface or whatever. But what you're doing is you're adding extra flour to your recipe, and what happens then is that your dough will come together nice and smooth and non-stick, and you'll think to yourself, this must be done now. I'm really pleased with this. It's come out really nice. And then it won't puff up properly because you haven't worked it enough. You've added a whole load extra flour to the recipe and you're still underworked, and so that's how you bake really heavy bread. It just won't puff up properly, which is a shame, because that's your best intentions at work, at play. What you've done without knowing is stitch yourself up a treat. You can see now this is not even sticking to anything now. It's not sticking to me, it's not sticking to the table. It's wonderful, and that's partly because of the butter that's in the recipe, and it's partly because of the work that I've put in so far. So let me tell you about the butter, right? Because you saw me mix up the dough without the butter first. And then I added the butter when the flour was fully hydrated. And it's a very important reason for that. Hold on, let's just have a little stop. Let's just stop and have a look at what's going on here. I'll tell you what, let's pause the timer. We're halfway through. If you thought it was done now, you're probably not alone, because it's looking a lot better than it was. It's still crinkly on the outside. It's got a bit of bounce to it, but it's not as strong as what it could be. It does rip quite easily like that. So I'll pop the timer back on. All right, we're back. I had to cut the camera because the battery was running out. I changed the battery. And there's a lesson for us there, because you can get away with stuff like that and come back and do your dough. There's no urgency involved here. So I'm going to put this back on and we're going to continue on kneading, and I will tell you about the butter situation. In a lot of recipes you'll see, sometimes for enriched bread doughs, people rub the butter into the flour before they add the moisture, and that, in my head, is a massive error. Because if you think about what we're trying to achieve here, we're trying to hydrate the flour and encourage all the gluten to develop really nicely. This is where our strength is, right? We're trying to encourage the gluten out of the flour, which requires moisture. And now think about what you're trying to do with pastry. When you're making pastry, you want it to break and crack and snap, yeah? You want that brittleness, I suppose. It's called the shortness, making it short, like shortbread, right? And to achieve that, we rub our butter into our flour first before we add any moisture. We are coating the flour with butter so that when we do add the moisture, everything we've done up till that point is to stop the gluten from developing. Otherwise, we get chewy and tough pastry, and that is completely what we don't want. So then, if that process is for that purpose, to not develop the gluten, that's what we're trying to do with pastry. Here, we're trying to do the opposite. So I hydrate the flour first and then add the butter in. Realistically, in the past, I've just popped the butter in with everything else because it's such a small amount, it's okay. But when we get into brioche territory, that's when things become a little bit more important. And I've become accustomed to doing it this way round in general now. Right, let's have a look at the change here. I can tell with my hands, you probably can't see, it's hard to translate into words, but this is becoming more and more responsive, pause, more tight, smoother, and it's less, oh, that was my tummy, did you hear that? Flipping it. It's becoming less loose. Does that make sense? And so if I'm rough with it, it's more likely to tear around here. If I'm really rough with it, what I'm doing is I'm listening, I'm feeling the dough. I'm feeling what it's telling me. It's telling me, don't stretch me out too far now because I'll tear. Which is why there's less stretching going on and more folding and kind of rolling. It's still physical energy, but I'm not pushing it past its boundaries. Does that make sense? I don't want to tear it up. I don't want to rip it. I don't want to crack that outside tension. I'm just kind of rolling it around for the final kind of 2.5 minutes, really. Folding it back on itself and giving it a little roll gently. See? I filled 7.5 minutes now of chit chat. What else can we talk about? I always say to people, the dough doesn't really mind about your technique here. It doesn't really mind what you're doing. As long as you're giving it some physical energy, pushing it, rolling it, folding it, as long as you're not tearing it, you don't have to put all your weight into it and push it really hard and stretch it and smear it all over the table. Just gentle, light work like this, and everything's coming together nicely. I've been doing a lot of demonstrations recently of food festivals for the first time in 2 years because there haven't been any. And I really appreciate the value of this. By talking to people up on the stage at a food festival, I appreciate more than ever the value of doing it by hand. And I get that sometimes there are some of you out there where kneading by hand just isn't practical. It isn't possible and isn't practical for you. And I understand that. But for those of you that can physically do it, there's massive value in just doing it. I believe it completely. 8-10 minutes, just working your dough. We can all stick it in a machine and put a timer on for 10 minutes and address all the WhatsApp groups we're currently involved in that require our attention 24 hours a day with the trivialest of trivialities. But realistically, in this world where we're all moving 100 miles an hour, trying to do more, I don't know, get quicker and quicker. Like certainly I need this time just to stand, just to digest my thoughts, stand in the quiet. Like 10 minutes is really not a big deal, you know. If you can find it, if you can do it, it's a really nice grounding process. And there's a lot of words that go around on Instagram with pictures of people doing yoga on a mountaintop, practicing mindfulness, but whatever you want to call it, mindfulness, meditation, whatever it is, it's just peace. Just coming back to the ground and saying, here I am. And that's what kneading does for me. And I think that's what kneading can do for a lot of people. 10 minutes, yes! Here we are, 10 minutes down the line. And we got there with a big massive tummy rumble right in the middle. It's probably going to happen again in a minute. Right, we have achieved smoothness here. And if you're not quite there, if your dough still looks like it's a little bit cracked up, I did a complete whole video on that before. Just leave it for a couple of minutes. Stick a bowl on the top like this. Leave it for a couple of minutes and come back and re-ball it back up again, and it will bring back that smoothness on the outside because you've given it your work, you've given it the 10 minutes that you need. You've put the physical energy in, and I'm completely confident that it is done, and so should you be, whether it looks like this or not. If it doesn't, just give it a little minute like that, refold it, and you'll have that smoothness on the top, on the outside. Now, because this is an enriched dough, I feel like they dry out a little bit more than everything else, and also because I slightly warmed the milk up because it's an enriched dough, so I often put it in a bowl like this with a bowl on top for its rest, or because I'm going to put this one in the fridge, I'll pop a little plate on top because I ain't got room in the fridge for a big massive bowl with a bowl on top. And that'll just stop it from drying out. You can wrap it in cling film if you want, but just to save the plastic wastage, it's nice to just stick a plate on top like that. Job done! If you are worried at any point if your dough is done or not, I never check for the signs, but I did do a video a while back on the 5 signs that your bread dough is fully kneaded. It's a very, very was quite an old one, I think, but I think it's very useful, and I'll link it up here if that's what you want to see. Other than that, we're done. Oh, that's cold now. And there you have it. I hope you got some value out of seeing the entire enriched dough kneading process from start to finish. And don't forget, it's very, very important to pause every once in a while to have a sip of your coffee while it's still warm. Thank you so much for stopping by for your weekly bread making tip. I hope you didn't mind 10 minutes of me waffling on. Hold on a minute. Maybe I should start an awkwardly silent podcast. Click like if you like this video, click subscribe if you want to stick around, and I'll see you very soon for another one. Bye-bye. And there it is. I hope you enjoyed this one. I always feel like it's beneficial to see things start to finish for real with your own eyes, so you know what to expect. If you don't want to miss any of my content from the week, don't forget you can get it all delivered to your inbox every single Thursday in your home baker's bulletin email. You can sign up for free in the link in the description's box. See ya.